As a quick disclaimer before I begin the actual content of this video, I advise that anyone under the age of 13 should not watch this video due to it covering highly controversial subjects. Now let's move on to the actual content of this video. Tech companies such as Apple usually hire manufacturers such as Foxconn and Quanta that have plants in China to make devices. However, the working conditions at Apple's Chinese factories have been quite controversial. Why is that though? Let's get into it. Taiwanese firm Foxconn is Apple's most prominent manufacturer of iPhones that employs 1.3 million people in China. However, working conditions inside Foxconn's factories are infamously stressful to the point where workers regularly committed suicide there via jumping off the factory's roofs. In 2010, Foxconn infamously responded to this via placing nets at the edges of their factories to catch people about to take their own lives. After hearing this news, former Apple CEO Steve Jobs stated, "We look at everything at these companies. Foxconn is not a sweatshop, it's a factory. But my gosh, they have restaurants and movie theaters, but it's a factory. But they've had some suicides and attempted suicides, and they have 400,000 people there. The rate is under what the US rate is, but still troubling." In 2011, Apple CEO Tim Cook visited Longhua, one of Foxconn's factories, and met suicide prevention experts and top management at Foxconn to discuss the issue. In 2012, 150 workers gathered on a rooftop and threatened to jump, but management convinced them to come down via promising improvements. However, conditions clearly did not significantly improve, for in 2016, a group of 7 to 8 workers also threatened to jump off a rooftop if they had not received their withheld paychecks. Foxconn's management once again convinced the workers to come down via promising to pay their withheld paychecks. Which company the workers blame varies. One worker, Xu, reported that, "We don't blame Apple, we blame Foxconn." On the other hand, a Chinese protester dressed as a factory worker outside an Apple store in May 2011 held a sign stating, "Heartless Apple, rotten Apple." I wish I could say that this is all the information I have to offer about Apple's brutal factory conditions, but that story isn't over yet. In May of 2022, 2 riots broke out of a factory owned by Quanta, another manufacturer of Apple products. The initial riot was in early May 2022 between workers and authorities regarding COVID-19 restrictions. The second riot was on the evening of May 21st, 2022, and although the reason for that riot is still partially unknown, workers chanted in translation from Chinese, "Down capitalism and roll back to Taiwan." In other words, the Quanta factory workers rioted due to wanting China to implement capitalism like Taiwan. However, workers also rioted at Foxconn in November 2022 in an altercation that lasted for days. Not only were these riots about COVID-19 restrictions, but they were also about workers being withheld their salaries, which seems to be a common issue at Foxconn. This times, Apple's only response was to limit airdrop for protesters to communicate amongst each other while bypassing censorship on social media. And even when asked about this issue by US officials, Tim Cook remained silent. In fact, when I heard about these riots during Black Friday in 2022, I decided to purchase my iPhone 14 Pro on that day, as they are already difficult to find, and I was unsure if finding one would still be easy with these riots. In my opinion, Apple should only let manufacturers build their products if they have safe working conditions no matter the cost, as worker safety is far more crucial than cheap labor. What do you think about the conditions at factories that assemble Apple products? Please comment that down below. As always, thank you all for watching this video. I'm the iTunes family, and peace out.